introduce
the last speaker.
Okay, Mr. Snyder has played an integral role in passing multiple local initiatives as well as Proposal 1. He's not only an activist but also a patient. He has a bone disorder called Nail Patella Syndrome. If I said it wrong, you fix it. Yeah. 7 years ago, he discovered that the federal government was supplying 5 remaining patients with 300 marijuana cigarettes a month, and one of the 5 also had NPS. George McMahon had been receiving his marijuana for over 20 years. Immediately, Mr. Snyder made up his mind to turn the seeming curse into a blessing by showing the inconsistency between how Mr. McMahon was treated compared to himself being persecuted. Having co-founded the Flint Coalition for Compassionate Care, Mr. Snyder speaks fluently about both medical and political aspects of medical cannabis from personal experience. Mr. Snyder should be an inspiration to all who seek a more free Michigan. And I might add that I saw him when I was away and drove out to Lansing. Actually, it was Diamond, Michigan. Is that right?
Diamondale.
Have you ever heard of Diamond, Michigan?
Diamondale, yes.
Diamondale.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, but that's where we basically talked to the people of the health department and thought they could improve upon the initiative by adding important regulations. More important regulations, which of course was the whole point of the thing, right? Anyway, I'll let you talk about that.
All right.
I just normally bring this can that George McMahon gave to me. I held a press conference in 2007 in Flint when we were passing our initiative, and he was nice enough to give me one of these to use as a teaching aid. But it's not going to be good up here. Maybe I can pass it around and I'd like to take a look at it. It's kind of neat to look at and see basically a can that's part of a regulated distribution system working. Granted, the medicine itself, which I can get into in the presentation, is pretty low grade, but here it is.
Oh, the 300 joints were crap. Is that it?
What was in the can?
That was where the 300 marijuana cigarettes came in the can, and then it gets distributed to each of the 5 patients' doctors, and then they pick it up from the doctor, and that's what they use.
Wow.
Got a lid. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Thanks to Scotty Bowman for making it possible and inviting me here. I appreciate it. Honored to speak. I, as he said, have played integral role in various steps to help bring about this law change in Michigan. I'd like to talk about the stories and experiences that helped lead me up to the present. And first, I guess I'll start with just a little bit about myself and my disease. I'm 31, I'm married, and I'm a father of a daughter and a possible son or daughter. Happy about that. And I was born with Nail Patella Syndrome. It's a neuromuscular skeletal disorder. It has internal and external symptoms. It's congenital and genetic. Basically, there's a 50% chance of passing it on to your offspring. When I was born, there's only 5 families that were known throughout the world to have Nail Patella Syndrome, so it was extremely rare when I was born. There was little known about it. As time progressed, in the late 80s, there was about 200 known cases, and with the advent of the internet, linking people together, I was able to meet people all throughout the world that have Nail Patella Syndrome. It knows no boundaries as far as ethnicity and race goes. But it's my hope that my personal experiences can help illustrate the importance of reintroducing medical cannabis, cannabis for therapeutic purposes into our society, and the pitfalls that I ran into, and which many untold others run into, and they don't acknowledge the medical legitimacy of cannabis. I was willing to endure the hardships of, which is a prerequisite for change sometimes. From as much as just your basic ridicule to imprisonment and assault by law enforcement officers, and amongst other things, of my civil rights that were basically really just totally disregarded in the midst of trying to quote unquote uphold Michigan law. Instead of legalities for just myself and a few others, I think I'm also fighting to help scores of other medically ill patients. I vowed to not stop until federal prohibition of medical cannabis has been overturned. Even if one ill individual can benefit legally from the drug and get some kind of pain relief as a result of my activism, I feel as if my mission has been accomplished. As far as the symptoms that are related to Nail Patella Syndrome that led me towards alleviating them with medical cannabis are the predominant things that exist within Nail Patella Syndrome are just, which is not as painful as you might think. Nails, thumbnails are the main nails that are missing in NPS patients, and then from the pointer finger out in that order, they can get worse, starting at the thumbnail. That's the least of the problems, but that's the very, the visible thing that people are able to, notice and quickly be able to recognize Nail Patella Syndrome. The main part for me is it manifests differently within each patient. So the thing about Nail Patella Syndrome, which growing up and as a child, right off the bat when I was born, the doctors didn't know if I'd be able to walk, and my mom was real stressed because I had a clubfoot deformity and my feet were just all twisted and mangled. This is from what I've seen from pictures, obviously, and I've heard. And fortunately, because of medical technology, they were able to slowly cast it and use corrective shoes to bring to straighten my feet, and that was like the first 3 years of my life. I had multiple surgeries on my feet. So those types of things happened, and as a child, as a kid, you don't really think about the pain and stuff that's occurring, but as I got older in life, I remember going back, I always experienced joint pain, and whenever I tried to push my body, I would get achy, and I just couldn't seem to excel in sports type activities and competitive type things like that. So fortunately though, my parents always encouraged me to keep trying, which was great. However, as I got older into high school, I started to recognize and notice that that even though I was grateful to be able to have all my senses and walk, and that it could be far worse than what I am experiencing, I started to notice the limitations involved with Nail Patella Syndrome. And up until that point, I only knew marijuana based on the definition that I had received from, from commercials, TV, news, society, Just Say No, Dare. And I think it's kind of funny because I was actually on the front page of the paper with the Just Say No parade when I was a kid, and I think about it. But not really very funny when you think about it, because Nancy Reagan, who helped basically push the Just Say No era, actually has presented the certificate of heroism to George McMahon at the height of the Just Say No Drug era. If I would have only known then, and even in my teenage years, because the way it worked out was, back to that. My definition came from the Just Say No and the Dare and all those types of things. So, as I began to experiment, like a lot of people do in high school, I just knew marijuana as a recreational aspect. I never, because of my brainwashing and programming, I never realized that it was medicine. I just never put two and two together. Even though I had an uncle who was very inspirational to me, Lloyd Stevens, he just passed away October 10th of 2008. He was 72, and he really I'd like to go into his story because he's such a great inspiration. It helps to illustrate, I think, the point that when we define cannabis as a drug and with no medicinal value, it cuts short and ruins an untold number of lives as a result of just a mistaken judgment based on, a misperception of what cannabis is. So, with George McMahon, you had one experience, and I'd like to show how my Uncle Hat, which was his nickname, a totally different situation where right off the bat, since he was 9, he was working. He was from the South, and he did have Nail Patella Syndrome, but he was able to overcome most of the symptoms and live a fairly normal life. He grew up in the Reefer Madness years, and he knew all about. He basically thought that if you use marijuana, it'll drive you insane and lead to hardcore drug use and all these false fallacies that have came about as a result of the drug war. But to say the least, he had a fall off the truck. He was a car hauler, and it was the late '60s, and after that fall, it exacerbated his symptoms. That's when the bone deformities and the joint problems all started to surface after this fall, which I experienced also, which I'll get to later. Trauma or major impact can sometimes make this bone disorder a lot worse. But getting onto the story about, he was bedridden for years, multiple years, and he was unable to take care of his normal household duties and work and all those things, and his friends would come over and continuously say, well, just try this marijuana, And he said, no, he would not literally run them out of the house, but yell, get out of my house. I don't want that crap in my house. I know what it's all about. I just don't want it here. And so over time, being in chronic pain, he just one day gave in and said, I'll try it. And he tried it, and he was immediately able to get out of bed and start cleaning up his home. That was an amazing result, because up until then, nothing was working for him. Now, hearing that story, because of the legal aspect of medical cannabis, I remember as a child growing up, the family, it was always a joke. It was like a joke that, and it was almost like he was less of a person or a criminal or something, like less of a human being just for trying to relieve his pain. That's what I remembered it as a child. It was almost a way to protect, my parents were only doing that out of love, protecting me from what they thought they knew, in other words. But I do believe to educate people right from the get-go, because you can get a lot of, you can lose a lot of, you can prevent a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering just through proper education. Because in my instance, once again, I go back to this definition of over-the-counter drugs, which are way more harmful, that can kill people, that are illegal, and then marijuana that's never killed somebody in all of human history. It's not consistent there, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it created a lot of conflict within my family, and this is from the people that love me. And it was a very crucial point during my teenage years where my self-esteem was developing, and I needed my father to support me and be there for me, and because I began to experiment with medical cannabis back then, which I didn't realize I was self-medicating at the time, it totally put a wedge between me and my father, and it sent me down a path that I would not suggest anybody would want to go. I mean, as the pain got worse, my family didn't want to believe me, because what I found out now was that a trauma exacerbates it to make it worse. I have a brother who's a sheriff's deputy. My dad works for AC Delphi, and for 30 years, and they have been able to work fine. And they always tell me, "Oh, well, we can do it. Look at us, we're fine. Why can't you do it?" And that was really having a strong work ethic instilled in me as a young kid. I mean, it started to work on me because I started to believe the rhetoric and the lies that the war on drugs. I mean, I would go back and forth. It was kind of like this seesaw thing, and but it also, at the same time, created experiences and a lot of the inspiration that helped me realize that not only myself, but a lot of other people could benefit from medical cannabis. For instance, when I was 22, I got into a car accident. That was my trauma. That was in 1999. And after that, I required a surgery, and just things started to go really rather downhill at that point for me. So I'd say, let's see, so yeah. So it was 99 accident, so in 2001, by 2001 I received multiple surgery, pens in my hand, and as a result of that, I started to get pain medication for the surgery, and that's when my first real long-term addiction, I guess, problem. That's another point I want to point out too, is I was already receiving pain and being told by doctors at that point that I was fine and just taking aspirin, even though I have a visibly deformed knee. It's obvious that there's pain there, but I mean, at a certain point as a patient, you start to question your own sanity. When you know you're feeling pain, and all these doctors and specialists you're going to one after another time, you're not in pain, you're not in pain. So I came to a point where doctors would not do anything for me. So I had legitimate pain. I wanted to do something about it. So yet another reason why we should always properly educate people about medical cannabis is since I had been lied to and I was well aware of it through the Just Say No and Dare programs, I was also more likely to start experimenting with other illicit drugs because I just wanted to remove my pain long enough. And doctors weren't giving me pain medicine, so I went out in search of other pain medicines just to try to live some kind of a productive life, and that in itself, it was a waste of money. I mean, it was just medicine that would normally be covered by my insurance, and I was just forced into this really odd position where now I have severe pain. Marijuana is illegal. The doctors won't give me any prescribed pain medicine, even though I have legitimate disease. As far as asking a doctor for Marinol, like our opposition says, it's like out of the question. As soon as I brought up Marinol, it was like, yeah, well, someone kicked me out the door for even talking about a Schedule 3, same as Vicodin, medication. And so I just started, at that point, I just got really depressed, and I was bedridden a lot, and I didn't know what to do. And I was opening up an email one day, and in that email I read about an individual who received 300 marijuana cigarettes from the government, a month, and that he had all these similar symptoms, and I thought it was rather odd that he had all these similar symptoms. And I read a little further, and as Scotty and I have already spoken, George McMahon was, I think he was the 28th legal patient. He got into the program in 1989, and so I started reading about it, and immediately the light bulb went off in my head. If he has Nail Patella Syndrome, and he's getting his medicine and receiving the certificate of heroism, and and I also didn't mention, like, some of the little run-ins, like, I've actually got in trouble for one marijuana cigarette, and that, and then that had me on probation, and then I had 2 weeks left of probation, and I was up in Mount Pleasant, and I was in the back seat of the vehicle, and there was, after multiple searches of roach paper in the front ashtray, I was in the back seat, and everybody in the vehicle got possession of that roach paper. It was nonsense, and so I went in there and decided to defend myself. I was like, I'll defend myself. This is not justice if they're going to put me in jail for something like this. I said, the owner of the vehicle testified that it wasn't mine, it was his vehicle. And I was like, okay, I'm all good here. And the judge didn't feel that way about the situation, and he gave me a 45-day sentence in the middle of my senior year for 0.06 grams of marijuana. So that was like an initial run-in with these arcane medical, or not just medical, but cannabis in general law. And I kind of already had a slanted view on things at that point. But so I guess I was more readily open to the idea of medical cannabis because of that background of knowing that my uncle benefited from it. Knowing that, or having these insane run-ins with these, I mean, it's like to think that my whole entire life could be ruined, my college funding cut off, and all these civil liberties eroded as just from having like 0.06 grams of paper. It was, to me, it was really insane. And so when that light bulb went off in my head, I had realized that, well, what can I do now for medical? It seemed to give it even more legitimacy. It's not just anecdotal. There's scientific and medical evidence, behind it. And so that helped give me, I guess, the motive to go search out what can I do, what steps can I take, what action, because that was the most important thing, was that even throughout all the years I've heard, a lot of complaining about things, a lot of this and that, but like, what can I do to take action and steps necessary to change the way these laws are? And so I just started going to like the best thing I knew, normal meetings. There was a Flint normal. I started there. Went to like Hashback, and I was fortunate enough to run into a friend, Mike Segesta, who happens to have pancreatitis, and he has a lot of, having went to medical school, he had a lot of knowledge, and he was able to give me this medical terminology and basically give me some solid foundation to base my intuitions that this is a medicine. Bottom line, anecdote, I knew that it worked just through, the moment I use it, I feel better, and I don't have any negative side effects associated with it as opposed to like Vicodin or Oxycontin, and totally different route of pain relief. But anyhow, to say the least, at that point, Mike sent me a research study on Ethan Russo's study showing how cannabinoids can reduce the amount of opiates you have to take. And when you have chronic pain, you can reduce the amount of opiate intake you have, then you can reduce a lot of those life-threatening side effects of pain medication. So at that point, I was really kind of interested, and I was still at the point where, okay, well, if I can get the best of both worlds. And so we went down to, Mike and ex-Detroit, or retired Detroit police officer Dan Solano, they decided to invite me to go to the 3rd annual Clinical Therapeutic Conference, which was put on by Mary Lynn Mather and Al Byrne. and this particular one was in Charlottesville, Virginia. I went down there and was able to basically even more so reinforce some of the ideas that I was introduced to, the studies that Mike had given me, and a few books I started to read. We had people such as Grandma Mae Nutt, who's no longer with us. She's a really inspiration. Her son, being a Michigander here, had testicular cancer in I believe it was the late 70s, maybe early 80s, and she became known as Grandma Marijuana because people were just sending loads of it to her house once they found out about her son. And so, it was her, and there was other patients. George McMahon couldn't make it because of health reasons, but there was Elvie Muzica, who had glaucoma. She's a federal patient. Irvin Rosenfeld, and he's a stockbroker out of Fort Lauderdale. He's also a very inspirational patient. Raphael Mechoulam, who had isolated the THC molecule. Dr. Abrams, who's done some of the clinical studies with AIDS out in San Francisco. It was just a really awesome experience, and even helped to further reinforce, like I've been saying, this intuition or this this knowledge that the cannabis plant somehow helps my disease way better than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. So that in itself just really inspired me. We came back home, and that was May of 2004, and that summer Tim Beck had started the Detroit Coalition for Compassionate Care, and actually, I mean, if anybody deserves a lot of thanks for getting everything started in Michigan, it was Tim for getting the Detroit Coalition for Compassionate Care started and running. I mean, he was one of my mentors, and that's exactly what I modeled. Me and Brian Morrissey modeled the Flint Coalition for Compassionate Care after Detroit Coalition for Compassionate Care. But in that 2004, it was Tim had worked to get it, and the petitioners had worked to get it on the primary, the August primary of 2004. So we did help get out the vote. We went around, drove around with the megaphone in Detroit, and vote for. I forget what the proposal was for Detroit, but vote yes on M, and we had a run-in with the Border Patrol. That was pretty funny, and